Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Cooking with Big Mark. We return after a brief hiatus.
Yes, and like the old Western song, back in the saddle again, we are here to go on. When we left last year, we were talking about mushrooms, so I thought I'd continue on that today, sort of talking about the most popular kinds of mushrooms that are around. Not many of you are going to go out foraging, I know, especially in downtown Chicago. But for those of you who enjoy it, in the supermarkets now, there, especially places like Whole Foods, you're getting a lot of now on the exotic mushrooms, or not so much exotic as different, depending where they come from. And there's so many different types of mushrooms, and the possibilities and recipes are endless. They're high in fiber and vitamins. Mushrooms are also fat and cholesterol free, and they do around the world with all the versatility that they've got in texture, and so people are really getting into them. People always ask, so what's the difference between you be going out foraging between a poisonous mushroom, a poisonous fungi, like a toadstool or something, as opposed to a mushroom? And I'm not about to give you any definite answers to that, but all I would say is just be very, very careful if you find a cluster of them, to go to somebody who knows what they're talking about. There's a field station in Waltham here that's run by the state. I know they used to have a mycologist study of mushrooms on staff you can go to. But one of the big things is if you see a cap and it's got the gills underneath the cap are white, that's probably poisonous. If you see anything red on the top or the stem before being cooked, those are probably poisonous. And if you see like a wreath around the stem or a saddle or like what they call a skirt, something that like any kind of a protrusion around the stem, that usually means it's poisonous. So those are the main things. And people say, well, if you can peel the skin back, it means it's a mushroom. Well, that's not true either, because it's one mushroom that's poisonous that you can do that too. So anyway, I'm just saying be careful, and obviously not people are going to be doing it. But so today we're going to have a little show and tell on mushrooms, and we'll take it up. I'm going to try and show them to you as I describe what they are. This is what they call the button mushroom, and its alternate names are cultivated button, champignon de Paris. It's very most common and mild tasting mushrooms around. About 90% of the mushrooms that we deal with here are the white button mushroom, mostly from Pennsylvania. That's where all the big cultivating goes on. Then we come to the cremini, which, as you can see, is like a small baby. Actually, it is. It's a baby portobello, and the other names for that is crimini, baby bella, golden Italian. And the characteristic, it's a young portobello, and all the cremina was darker and firmer, more flavorful than its cousin, the white button. The two can be used interchangeably, and retailers are now starting to sell more of those as baby bellas. That's what they're talking to sort of increase sales on them. But they're very, very usable and a very readily available mushroom. These are the big daddies of the cremini. These are the big portobellos. And these are wonderful mushrooms, especially for people who are vegetarians. They're called field mushrooms or open caps. They're common in Italian cooking. They're dense. And the rich portobellos that would lead depth to sauces and pastas and make a great meat substitute. When portobellos are in small, they're called that. We talked about that earlier. If you want a substitute, you can even use the mushrooms flat cap. Mushrooms of this variety are so wide in the palm of your hand, and their meaty texture stands up to grilling or stuffing, anything you want to put into it, like crab or spinach or any cheese items, stuff you put in the pepper, you can do with the portobello. And as I say, they're great for grilling as well. Then we have the shiitake mushroom. And that is now being cultivated more and more. And you see these now in supermarkets where they weren't that much available, but now they're getting it. Martha's Vineyard has a big mushroom growing thing, and that's what they grow, our shiitake. But they're very good. The caps are very tasty. However, the stem is very tough So you'd normally not use that in anything that you're going to use sliced mushroom. However, it can be used in stocks if you had to do it. In Japanese, the shiitake means oak fungus, which describes what mushrooms can be found in the wild. In these days, however, most shiitakes are cultivated. And they're very much identified by their umbrella-shaped brown caps, which curl under ever so slightly. Fresh shiitakes have a slightly woodsy, sort of fresh aroma, and again, add a little mystery to whatever they're being used for. These are what we call the maitake mushrooms, and another name is hen of the woods. I know more of the name hen of the woods than I do the ram's head. The characteristics from a distance, these can almost look like a head of cabbage, cultivated as well as found in the woods where mushrooms are often sold in clusters with the soft feathery caps overlapping. This mushroom has an earthy aroma and gamey flavor. It is native to both the Northwestern United States and Japan, and grows very wild east in cold climates. Now we have, they're called the oyster mushroom, which again, these are now prevalent in the supermarkets. And again, these are called tree oyster or angel's wings, Pluto or wheat, that's a French name from the abalone. Though this can be found wild growing in the sides of trees, the ones you find in the store on a menu are most likely cultivated. And like their namesakes, they're whitish in color and fan-shaped and possess a delicate odor and flavor. Oyster mushrooms are found in many Japanese and Chinese dishes. They're very popular in the Asian things. And again, as they say, they are now very much prevalent in our supermarkets. They weren't for a while. Little babies of the mushroom world are the enoki, and these are very thin little caps on top, sometimes called futu or winter mushrooms. The edible variety, the small little white caps with very, very thin stems. You can see the picture's not as clear as the other ones. In the wild, they grow on these Chinese hackberry trees, and they are almost all eaten cold and with garnish because there's not much to them. But it's a garnish. It has a great use for that. Now, this is called beech mushrooms, which I am not familiar with at all. I don't think I've ever seen them, but they grow in a big clump. I don't think they grow on beaches, but because it's B-E-E-C-H, not B-E-A.
Oh, okay.
And they're called clamshell mushrooms. They're cooked. When they're cooked, they're crunchy brown caps, crunchy with a sweet nuttiness. Raw, however, they taste kind of bitter. So these are only cooked. So you can see all these mushrooms all have different qualities to them. This is a king trumpet mushroom. You can see how the shape of that is so much different. It's got a huge bulbous stem, and that's what most people look for. It's named again King Oyster or Trumpet Royale and King Brown mushroom. And it's all about the thick stem on this mushroom. That's where all the flavor and everything is in it. I'm sure for some of you, this is more mushroom information you need to know, but we'll go on with it. These are black trumpet mushrooms, which you can see is very depth in color and black. It's kind of a beautiful, beautiful color. They're called horn of plenty or black chanterelle, and they maybe in the late summer find in Midwest and East and grow all over the place in the West. They have a rich, smoky flavor and notes of a sort of a truffle mushroom when they're being cooked. Now I come up to the elite of mushrooms, the chanterelle. And this is a sort of deep depression in it. And these are very expensive, mainly because they have an awful time, almost impossible way to cultivate them. So as a result, they're scarce, and people that who are scarce, they want them, and they want them, they demand, and they get expensive. They're called golden yellow egg mushrooms, girole, and they're trumpet-like. As I said, they usually forage in the wild. Golden hued, fleshy and firm, they're described as having an apricot-like scent. And they're common to many European cuisines, including French and Austrian, and are native to the United States. They're particularly abundant in the west and northwest from September into the cold months. Again, getting near the end of our list here, we have the hedgehog mushroom, which is, again, sort of a fluffy type of thing. It has this called sweet tooth or wood hedgehog, because it has a sweet, has a sweetness to it. With a sweet smell and taste, it makes sense that this mushroom is also called sweet tooth. It's crunchy, nutty, and meaty, and these mushrooms are very similar to a chanterelle. It grows mostly in winter on the West Coast, so we don't see too many around here. And finally, we have, well, not finally, but one more is the morel, which is sort of another queen of mushrooms, I think. Again, most of these don't grow in the wild and are not cultivated, but they have that little pocked exterior, which is French and Italian chefs love, because they absorb a sauce beautifully. And like the nooks and crannies of an English muffin, these nooks and crannies absorb the sauce in a nice way. And it's a springtime treat in the Midwest and West, and you can't mistake the conical, spongy look and the woodsy flavor of it. And finally, we have the porcini, which is probably the most popular mushroom in Europe, especially in Italy. In France, they're called cèpes. And all those famous recipes you've seen for years in Italy and France, this is the mushroom that they're talking about. We don't get them much around here. They're slightly reddish brown with brown in color. Porcini are one of the most prized wild mushrooms, sought for their wild texture and smooth woodsy flavor. They're popular in Italy, as well as in France, where they're called cèpes, as I said. Fresh porcinis aren't easy to get here, but we get them for the most part. You can get them dried, and people will reconstitute them in a little bit of warm water, and that gives you a nice stock for a basis of stock. So that's the mass mushroom story for the day, and there'll be no quiz afterwards. At least you have an idea of what to look for. And it's fun to know, especially with vegetarians, to go in and whether it's risottos or ragouts or whatever, just green mushrooms. They all have different flavors. It's kind of fun to get a variety of them and see if you can notice the nuances of flavor. So that's the mushroom story for today.
Yeah, 15 ways of looking at a mushroom. I liked the visual aids that worked out very well. Although the talking mushroom aspect was kind of funny, because we couldn't see your face.
You could see it, you couldn't.
Could not. It's like a talking porcini. In any case, what I were you going to say? Oh, there you go.
That's the way it's planned.
There you go. So what I was going to talk about today, just in brief, is a lot of folks practice dry January. I have no clue why one would want to deprive oneself of alcohol during the worst part of the year, but we're interesting folks. So thinking about non-alcoholic cocktails, you really go back to an adage that Dad has always espoused, which is flavor in, flavor out. If you think about why a deceptively simple drink like the martini is so pleasing, it's because it's got so many flavors going on. It's the botanicals are what really make gin interesting aesthetically. So if you're thinking about that, or a Manhattan, where you're sort of the toastiness and the char of the wood, you have affected the flavor of the whiskey, and you're just adding that little sweet element. The interplay in cocktails, alcoholic or non-alcoholic, sort of puts me in mind of Samin Nosrat's series, Fat, Acid, Salt, Heat, is you're melding complementary elements. So if you're thinking about acidity and sweetness are kind of the backbones of any cocktail, but if you're thinking mocktails, you're dealing with juices, citrus, all this stuff, that's your acidity. And of course, citrus fruits have some sweetness as well. But playing that against a simple syrup, a honey syrup, gives it that sort of dramatic tension, which carries the drink flavor-wise. It's almost like salt in food. And in the spirit of flavor and flavor out, one thing to think about is the more you bring into your shaker, for your non-alcoholic beverage, the more layered and nuanced it will be. You think about wonderful ingredients like ginger or galangal, which is kind of it's a lesser known counterpart. Anything anise based, you think about fennel. Anise is a great cocktail ingredient in general, as is ginger, and you can make non-alcoholic cocktails with both. I mean, I think about probably the most satisfying cocktail I ever had was at a sort of dumpy club outside of Padua in Italy, and it was just gin limon. It was literally just this wonderful sparkling lemon soda and gin, and it carried everything that you want in a great cocktail: acidity, sugar, botanicals, and then the sparkling aspect is really what puts it over the top. So I think if you're doing a little citrus, you're doing a little simple syrup, you maybe put some ginger in there, some yuzu, you sort of spice up the mix. A great way to finish a non-alcoholic cocktail is with sparkling soda, seltzer, anything like that, because the bubbles really kind of lift everything the way they do in, for instance, champagne. So if you're going dry, there's still a lot of great material to work with. Appreciate you tuning in to Cooking with Big Mark, and we will see you next time.
So, mashallah.